Leadership and coaching. Many people who are leaders at the moment think, well, the uncertainty I face right now is so challenging that maybe even I need a coach, but how am I able to find the right one? And also, how can I give coaching to other people? I have an international expert from Ireland today with me. Hello and welcome, Sean Weafer.
Hello, Niels. Glad to be here.
Thank you very much for taking the time, and I'm going to get straight into it. Leaders at the moment, and of course I prepared for this podcast, they are very insecure about the uncertainty. And when they think, I'm in a leadership position, what shall I do? Shall I tell my people it is very insecure, which has the risk that people suddenly run off? Or shall I tell people everything is fine, although I know it's not? What would you recommend them to do?
I think there's a slightly deeper element in that in terms of leadership styles need to address or be changed at the moment. So at the moment, we're still working very much, which was facilitated by working on site with a command and control type approach, where leadership is coming from expertise and skills and the ability to be able to resolve problems. I think with the COVID crisis and people now working in this blended managed environment, where a lot of our people are working remotely and maybe some will come back and work in the office, we need a very different leadership style. We need an influential or advisor-based leadership style. So we need to become a lot more collaborative, co-creative, and solution-oriented, sharing ownership with people. And in those circumstances, that shift, that requires transparency. It means being open and honest with the people around you and then trusting them to be able to work with you to come up with more relevant and more effective solutions. So rather than dictation, we move very much into a more coaching or mentorship type approach to leadership, where the leader is operating in a way that he or she creates the environment in which his or her people can excel.
So when we have some people now who are in business for, let's say, 10, 15, 20 years, telling them to change their style, not being the strong person in front to tell everyone what they should do, how do you, because many people will think, isn't that a weakness or isn't that some sort of approach that doesn't fit my personality? How would you make someone change in that way?
Well, I think in the situation in terms of change, I think what you're looking at is there's a number of key skills that a leader can learn in order to be more effective and to move his or her style to a situation where they're more influential in what they do. So critical skills, for example, might be learning to work with different kinds of personality types and styles, learning how to be a better presenter or speaker, to be more comfortable with developing rapport with people, or to understand the psychology behind that. And also, probably one of the most important elements is understanding how to use questions and influencing language in a way that brings people together with you to synergize, to come up with solutions from all of the potential and capability that they have. I mean, if you look at it from the perspective of a simple graph, so you have a vertical axis and you have a horizontal axis, where the vertical axis is skills and wills, so ability to do the job and willingness to do it. And then you have length of time with the company, which is the horizontal axis. If you graph those two together, what you typically get is a bit of a bell curve, where it's low at the very start and low at the very end, where skills are low at the start. So people need to be told what to do because they don't know what they're doing. And willingness is low at the other end because they're there a long time, they're thinking and moving, so the motivation is gone. That's where there's definitely still a requirement for command and control, more directive approaches. But for the vast majority of that curve, where people have high skills, high levels of motivation, they don't respond well to being dictated to in terms of being told what to do. What they do respond to is somebody who facilitates, advises, and engages with them in a way that brings the best of themselves to the job, where they feel recognized, acknowledged, and engaged. And that's where a lot of leaders can learn these skills, such as coaching or questioning skills or rapport development skills. They can be learned or they can be coached to use those skills more effectively.
Excellent advice. You just mentioned just briefly questioning technique. Do you think that many leaders make major mistakes when it comes to asking the right questions or asking them in the right way? And if they make mistakes, which are the usual mistakes?
I think in a lot of cases, many of us use questions. We're obviously aware of the fact that we're using questions, but many of us use questions in a way that's not influential. So, for example, there are like 6 different types of questions you can use, all of which have a different impact on the psychology of the person who's responding to you. So you can use questions like, and many of us would be familiar with open and closed questions, for example, but there's also state and stall questions, where you can change the emotional state of the individual, which is a very powerful question to know, because what that does is allows you to influence the decisions ultimately they commit to making. There are tag questions, There are double-bind preferential questions. There's value elicitation questions. There's convincer questions. For a leader in today's world, the ability to be able to ask questions and make suggestions rather than simply making directive statements is a critical skill to where they become significantly more successful in their role as a leader. And more importantly, when they learn to use questions, here's the real power of questions. If someone gives you an answer to your question or agrees with your suggestion framed in the form of a question, they're accountable for what happens afterwards. So in other words, you have more accountability in a situation where you're using questions to influence outcomes than when you're simply directing people to do things. Because when you're directing them, then the next time they have a problem, they're going to come to you. So what happens as a leader is you end up being the constant problem solver. Instead of moving to a stage where by using questions and suggestions, you get them to learn how to do it better and more effectively, therefore minimizing the amount of time that they need to waste of yours so you can focus on being more strategic, which is fundamentally what your job is.
So talk about what fundamentally their job is. Many people, especially when we prepared for this interview, leaders said, we have problems with, let's say, our customers don't trust us anymore with their money. They know they might buy our services, but we simply see that sales went down significantly, not only due to COVID crisis. A couple of things came up where we always knew they were around, and suddenly we have to not really restart, but refocus our business. I saw that one of your offers on your website is winning high trust sales engagement with clients. And of course, leaders are interested in getting high trust sales engagements. That, of course, somehow alludes to the fact that you think that many companies sell on low trust or no trust.
Yeah, I think that's a good question. I think the differentiation between trust and high trust is that there's different levels of trust in relationships. Mm-hmm. So, for example, you and I might know each other, we like each other, yes. We may trust each other, but there may be certain things that I don't share with you, and vice versa, things you don't share with me. Yeah. But in a high trust relationship, there is no hesitation, no reservations, no limitations, no boundaries whatsoever. A client freely and happily shares with you, or for that matter, a team member, an employee, freely shares with you their challenges, their issues, without fear of judgment, on the basis that they appreciate that you can help them synergize to find solutions to their challenges. Now, many organizations will have clients who are in that situation, clients who only see them as the people they want to work with because they have that high degree of trust. But in a lot of cases where we don't have that high degree of trust, we may get a certain amount of business, but we certainly don't get all of the business. And so it's beholding on our relationship managers, our sales teams, and our leaders, particularly if you're, for example, a professional in a professional services firm or financial services firm, to build those compelling levels of individual trust with people who ultimately make the decisions.
So that's, of course, now a very broad question, but how do I get to that level of trust when I don't have it at the moment?
I think what that comes down to is the ability to be more effective at how you build rapport with them. You can raise the level of relationship at any stage by maybe improving more transparency, being willing to ask questions and listen more than perhaps you did in the past. And more importantly, move away from the situation where you have to be the fount of all knowledge and deliver all the expertise to a situation where you facilitate conversations and you become a catalyst, if you will, of productivity for that client. So in other words, in a lot of cases, not assuming that the client knows nothing, but rather taking a different approach and looking to identify what it is that they do know, and then providing information in a way that's meaningful and valuable to them and where they can see a way to monetize that or gain greater value from that. So it's very much about moving from being the expert to being this highly trusted advisor.
Excellent. So to wrap this whole interview up, when people are sitting there now and thinking, okay, where to start right now? You as an executive business coach, let's just imagine I'm a leader. I am not confident about the future. What are Sean Weafer's top 3 tips what I should do right now?
The first thing is to get clear about the next planning for the next 3 to 6 to 12 months. So decide what are your primary KPIs? How am I going to deliver on them? The second thing is identify who in your team are the sort of people you can rely on who can either step up because it's a skill they can learn for the future, or it gives them more face-to-face time with you, and who are willing to get involved in helping you deliver on those KPIs. And the third thing is don't be afraid to make mistakes. Forgive yourself, right? We don't get better by being perfect. We get better by perfecting. So none of us know what the future is going to be. And so the difference at the end of the day is remember that we're not trying to predict it, but to remember the fact that we can create it if we approach our marketing, we approach our people, and we approach our clients in the right way.
Excellent. That is very good advice. Of course, I'm going to put your contact data in the show notes of this podcast. So if anyone now thinks I'd like to talk to Sean a bit more, just drop him an email. The email address is in the show notes of this podcast. And yeah, for this interview, there's only one thing for me left to say. Sean, thank you very much for your time.
And thank you, Niels.